Today, we have the America's Heroes Group Roundtable, Legally Speaking with Steve. He was an incredible attorney. Today is Saturday, April 24th, 2021. April is Sexual Assault Awareness and National Death History Month. Our panelist is Stephen J. Seidman, founding attorney of Seidman Law Office with over 30 years as an exceptional and experienced trial lawyer, focused on personal injury. Steve is America's Heroes Group partner, sponsor, and advisory board member. What an incredible partner we have in Steve. If you have any legal problems, make sure you look him up. I'm telling you. Our discussion today is the 2021 updates on legal issues, and it is always an honor to have you on, Steve. Give us an idea of what's going on with these 2021 updates. I know you always have a wealth of information to share with us.
And I thank you, Doctor. I will say that on the Zoom, I'm not let into the room yet, but that's good because many times people say I only have a face for radio anyway. So it's perfect.
Yes.
In any event, I will tell you that last time I'd like to focus on a few issues today. And one of the things we left with last time was that, Doctor, you had some experience with discrimination claims.
Yes.
Discrimination claims. And I'm gonna finish with that because I'd like to talk about military discrimination as well as racial military discrimination. And what you raised last time is something that we need to talk about, if you don't mind. So I'll leave that
sure.
to the end. And
absolutely.
First start with the other legal updates that we have. The first of which is, and this is our executive producer, Glenda Smith, doing, I believe, in many respects, getting things moving a couple of years ago. But believe it or not, for the first time in history, and we've been talking about a lot of military history, a United States Air Force general is being court-martialed for the first time in the history of the service. Why? The charge is linked to allegations of sexual assault against a civilian during a 2018 off-duty incident. The Air Force said it was unclear when the court-martial will take place, but, Doctor, this is a very big deal because for years, and this is one of the things that we worked on talking about, there was so much rampant sexual discrimination going on in the ranks and overlooking of that discrimination over the years that something had to be done. And it was sort of brought to bear by this Ms. Guillen's death recently, and it brought a groundswell. And this particular Air Force general is a two-star general, and the sexual assault charge is against Air Force Major General William Cooley, former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory. And there was a preliminary Article 32 preliminary hearing, and the decision, they said, was not made very lightly. But since this is Sexual Discrimination Month, this sexual assault charge, it was tied to an off-duty incident in 2018 where this man made undesired sexual advances, including kissing and touching a civilian person in New York, woman. And he was charged with this particular violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice for further review. And actually, once again, the first time in Air Force history, a general officer has faced this type of trial. So maybe what we're seeing is that the Air Force and the Army and the armed services as a whole will start to make sure that they're going to do things in the proper way and follow through with these discriminatory charges, especially when it's dealing with those individuals in the military. And what we've seen over the years is, of course, all kinds of sexual discrimination, not only against other sexes, but, same sexes. And it was overlooked, whitewashed. They just kind of put it in the side and didn't do anything about it. So hopefully this is a good thing to come. And is when you get a general on the hook here, that's a big deal, as you know.
Yes, yes. Steve, I have one quick question about that, because you were saying that this is a civilian person, that he was making these advances towards.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's even stricter than just your military command, right? So it's what you do in public, too, with other people.
Exactly. And so he actually was in public in an event, I don't know whether it was in a bar or otherwise, and basically he apparently made some unwanted advances, including some touching and kissing.
Yes.
And, that obviously is, a big deal. And actually what they said was it was interesting that the Judge Advocate Corps, which is the legal division of the military, they said that usually general officers don't want to prosecute each other because it's the old boy chummy network.
Oh, yeah.
But now we have, again, we're going to talk about General Lloyd Austin, who's the Secretary of Defense, and he's made combating sexual assault in military a priority. And one of his first acts after taking office was to order a review of how the military handles these types of cases. And the quote was, the Air Force Trial Judiciary will identify a senior military judge and coordinate timing and venue for the court-martial proceedings, service explained, adding that the jurors or court members must either be officers of higher rank or equivalent grade, but with an earlier date of rank to the accused. So, I mean, General Austin has made it a thing of his to stop what has been before all this a major problem. And this, of course, as you pointed out, Doctor, was done outside of the military institution, off base, so to speak. So it even brings more stringent review to it.
Yes. Boy.
If I could go through just a couple of old things that we talked about. First of all, Doctor, you're familiar with the earplug situation. The first, what we call bellwether trial, is ongoing. And to those that don't remember, these earplugs were manufactured by Arrow Manufacturing Company, and they were then Arrow was bought out by 3M. It turned out that Arrow paid the federal government about $9 million for what's called a Ketan case, a whistleblower case, that actually turned out that these earplugs were ineffective. They didn't work at all. And, of course, as you know, being in the military, the ground shook when you used to go around. I mean, literally you're hearing. So people got tinnitus. They got loss of hearing. So the lawsuit, and this litigation is going on for a few years for those people that have had loss of hearing and also have tinnitus, which is the ringing in the ears, is now the bellwether trial is now started. So what is a bellwether? If the plaintiffs win the case, then there might be settlements that might occur afterwards. It's the same thing we've seen with the Roundup litigation and all type of multiple things. The Roundup, of course, being the weed killer. So there's bellwether trials and the talc cases with Johnson & Johnson. And what it takes is for them, the companies, to lose. And then once they lose a few times, then they'll start maybe talking about settlements. So these bellwether trials are important, and one is ongoing.
Yeah.
If you might remember that years ago, not that in too far distance past, there was a 2015 outbreak at the Quincy Veterans Home, and it was a Legionnaires outbreak. One of the things that our firm does a lot of at Simon, Margulis & Thurman is Legionella bacteria and litigation. And Legionella is this disease that it basically comes from birds, goes in the dirt, ends up in fountains and water. And it started out at a Legionnaire conference way back when, and was spread through the air purifiers, the air conditioning tank units. And as a result of that, many people got sick and died of this respiratory disease that kills and also leads to cognitive developments. Well, at Quincy in 2015, if you might remember, the state of Illinois had this veterans home, and there were a number of people that got the Legionella bacteria and a number of people that died. And talking about changing things, 14 deaths were tied up to the outbreaks, and 12 of the families sued in the state of Illinois Court of Claims. What happened in the Court of Claims is it used to be a $100,000 cap, and because of this, and I was interviewed by WBZ, I remember, the cap was changed. It's now $2 million. And the people who actually were part of the 12 people that died. They settled for a total of $6.4 million,
Wow.
which to me is not an abnormally high amount for 12 people. The settlements range from what I'm understanding from 775 to, or I'm sorry, 75,000 to 750,000, depending on the age, the health, and everything else. What's interesting is that our firm and my partner and I, Melanie Fairman, tried to Legionella case for a retired lawyer and got $3.8 million. So
Wow.
you can still see that, which did set a record for Legionella verdicts in Illinois. But at the end of the day, you could see the disparity between the veterans who tried to get the monetary amount and those in the general public who might have a lawsuit. So there's still a disparity. But this comes up with the same Quincy Veterans Home now. There were, take a guess, but I won't make a guess, but there were 24 COVID-19 related deaths reported at the Quincy home. 24.
Wow.
There are lawsuits. By the way, with regard to that Legionella situation, the Attorney General, Kwame Waro, refused to file any charges in the deadly Legionella outbreak at Quincy and said, well, these are just more like an accident. Nobody meant for this to happen. But there's such a thing as gross negligence. But recently, in February, Attorney General decided not to bring any charges whatsoever. And sometimes, as we all know, the only way we are able to rectify things to make sure they don't happen again is to go ahead and to bring charges at times. And the reason I mentioned the 24 COVID deaths, 24 at Quincy, that's abnormally high for veterans homes. So we have the same home who's already been brought to bear because of their water system, which was totally defective and caused disease and death. So now there are lawsuits in the state of Illinois, Court of Claims for those. And it's important to note that, that home is, and it's a veteran's home, so it has some issues. I'd like to take a few minutes, if I could, Doctor, because I know time's going to go short, is what you mentioned last week. In veteran discrimination, there's a bunch of types of veteran discrimination. Okay. And one of the types that we see, and recently a major company just settled, where people who are in the military are not given leave off of work and sometimes disciplined for doing their military duties. Well, that's against the law, and that's discriminatory, and that can lead to a lawsuit. And a recent large company just settled for, I think it was $6 million because of doing that to their veterans or their active military employees. In other words, those are active military have to go to the military. Sometimes they'd be terminated or disciplined or just laid off because they leave for an extended period of time. You're not allowed to do that. There's also a lot of veterans' rights discrimination. I think that this started, in my mind, to come to kind of an issue last month, when you talked about how, as part of the veterans' disability process, there was an inordinate amount of African American people who were not getting the same type of treatment and benefits. Yeah. The success ratio from your own anecdotal evidence was not less than a white person. And so what I think, in thinking about this after that show, how do we explore whether or not that is indeed true? And I think one of the things we need to do is do a FOIA or maybe a letter to General Austin. And I plan to do that, and I don't know if I can enlist maybe your name on the letter as well. But I think that the only way that we're going to ever determine whether or not there is this statistical discrimination, which, last time I was on the show, I reiterated the 60 Minutes story and the statistical abnormalities of African Americans being jet pilots, being in major command, and enough was enough. And that, in fact, there had been some social media done by one of the large, major officers, and it has really taken traction. And the way this all came up for the listeners was that when I mentioned this to you last month, you had said that you've seen it sort of anecdotally with the disability process. So in other words,
absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so maybe you can tell us just a little bit about it, because what I want to do, taking the remaining few minutes, is to figure out a game plan that we could, during this show, through Ms. Glenda Smith, there was we took an active sexual discrimination role there. We had something to do, I believe, with changing the Ferris Act, in that we had the Ferris Act was an immunity for those people in the military who couldn't sue for malpractice. There was a change there. There's been some changes, and I think the only way that this all starts is for us to start. And so I think the best way for us to do is to see how we get through FOIA, Federal Information Request, the statistics on the amount of white people, the amount of black people who have applied, the amount of people that have been on it or successfully managed to get benefits who are white and black, and what the statistical abnormalities are.
Yeah. Yes.
But if you could just tell us what your experience would be, I think that would be helpful.
Well, part of my personal experience is that, I was going to the VA and actually had some, things that happened to me when I was overseas. One of them was getting, the tinnitus in my left ear. I was actually involved with the landing of an RPG that just blew these bars out of a wall, and it sort of resounded in myself and a sergeant that was with me in Mosul, Iraq. We actually had I had blacked out and fallen to my right knee, and I didn't even realize that until a little bit later. And pieces of it sort of unfold as you're coming out of it. But it was sort of like Saving Private Ryan when he landed on that beach and everything was exploding, and he sort of had a blackout period. That's the best way I could explain it. And it felt like a shock wave going through your body over and over and over again, like you were a bell ringing. That's how my body felt. And when I came out of it, I could see people, but I couldn't hear anything. And they were yelling and saying, looking at me and saying, are you okay, I guess. And I was, as a commander at that point, for the, the medical unit at that, on the FOB. So, I just told them, I said, take cover, because I didn't know if another one was coming in. And the next thing I remember was sitting down. It was nighttime at that point. This, it was in the afternoon when this happened, somewhere around 2 p.m., 1,400 hours. And then I just remember sitting at a desk, next to a station, trying to do something for this cut that was on my knee. And then, it just like a flash by. It was just, it's kind of surrealistic, when you go through that. So when I got back, I was talking to people who are first of all the healthcare providers, and they had their back to you. They were in the computer screen completely. Weren't taking everything down. If you said something, it was like, okay, that's fine. But what about your blood pressure? You taking your medications? And what about this? What about that? And they never would, I don't think, annotate the things that you were saying, never really paying any credence to what you're saying. And they actually, had a back problem as well, from being thrown around on some of the missions that we were doing, because I was in mechanized infantry and then also on Black Hawk helicopters doing hard landings, and hurt my neck. So all these things that we were talking about, they didn't even want to pay attention to it. When I went to a review, I was sitting in a room because there were some things tied to that, and so we were working with this one person who just didn't even pay attention, and that's all I can say. He really never wrote anything down. He then told me that he wasn't there to see my back. I had a letter with me from my personal provider. Never looked at it, so I had to turn it in, and. After the meeting, but he said then the evaluation came through and it said 0% for your back. And I said, I thought he said he's not going to even look at it. So that's the kind of thing that was going on, Steve. And we're running out of time right now, so we're going to cut in. But I really want to have you back on to talk about this because I think this is a major movement.
Next time we're going to spend solely on this.
Yes.
So have a great day. Thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you, Steve.